Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to IBM TV's Higher Education on Economics Monday. We have a great group of people that are going to be joining us today to discuss some of the leading area issues that relate to higher education. And first of all, I want to bring in our Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times bestseller, a gentleman who teaches as a lecturer at Syracuse University School of Law. Let's welcome the unbelievable David K. Johnson. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Nick.
Yeah,
good afternoon.
Depending on what part of the world you're in, we just got off of our Economics Monday show. We had people from Nepal, we had people from Switzerland, depending where you're at, and New Zealand, depending where you're at, depending whether it's morning, afternoon, or good night. By the way, at 10 o'clock is actually, and this time is sort of an ideal time because when we run in India, we actually run prime time in India. So it's kind of interesting to watch. We're prime time in India and we're morning in the United States. And another person we'd like to bring in on the show is one of my favorite authors, the co-author of The Millionaire Next Door, and his recent book, Richer Than a Millionaire. Let's bring in Bill Danko. Bill Danko, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yes, good to have you here. And it's good to have a Pulitzer Prize winner with somebody that sold 4 million books. I mean, I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. And
I'm jealous.
And he's continually selling books because he's got the Richer Than a Millionaire book that just got published. So that's pretty good. And then we also want to bring in a person who is a J.D. Elam attorney. He's also the former associate dean of the University of South Dakota School of Law. Let's welcome in Dan Worthington. Dan, welcome to the show. Okay, and Dan is also a current author of Writes a Lot for Trust and Estates magazine, which in my younger, more halcyon days was one of my favorite reads. It was basically, if you're working like I did in the largest state area back from, I worked in it for 17 years, that one of the magazines you had to read is Trust and Estates.
Yeah.
Because what they did is they showed, and David, you get 40 magazines. I'm jealous. Trust and Estates, what they did is showed all the different ways that you could design your estate so you didn't have to pay the federal estate tax. Okay. And literally, I worked in that area for 17 years. One of my clients was the founder of Dunkin' Donuts. I got his book back here. A lot of my clients have since passed away, including him, Bill Rosenberg. I had the family that was the founder of Coca-Cola. I had the president of Bausch and Lomb. I had the president of Kimberly-Clark and the president of Philip Morris. And then all of a sudden in 2000, I told them I am out of the estate planning area. Actually, they kind of told me that they were out. They wanted me out of their estate plans. Why? They passed a law that eliminated the estate tax in 2010. And they were saying, I don't need you as an estate planning attorney anymore if there's no estate tax. And you know what? They were right. And so I went to the University of Miami Estate Planning Institute, which Phil Heckerling was actually my professor. And so I'd been going to the Institute for 17 years, and I told everybody at the Institute, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do estate planning anymore. They're going, what are you talking about? I said, there's not going to be an estate tax in 2010. My clients told me I'm basically fired. So they go, oh, they're going to put a patch. They're going to do something. Magic's going to happen. I said, look, I'm not going to wait for that magic to happen. And I got into pension plans, literally, just because one of our attorneys said a long time ago, hey, look, if estate planning isn't working well and the economy's going bust, change your practice into bankruptcy planning. Okay, in other words, to be a bankruptcy attorney. Mm-hmm. So I reinvented myself as a pension attorney. And lo and behold, do you know what? In 2010, the estate tax was completely repealed.
For 1 year.
For 1 year,
For
right,
1
right.
year.
Yeah, but see, when they reinstated, I kept saying, should I get back involved in this or not? But see, David, when they reinstated it, it was so large, it wiped out a law, what I call my bread and butter practice. In other words, when I was working in the area, $600,000, you would then be faced with a federal estate tax. And today, so we put together these AB trusts, making it $1.2 million. Okay, and then it kept raising that amount, but basically it was about $1.2 million back then. And then now today it's not $1.2 million for the AB trust, and you don't even need an AB trust to get there. Okay, well, you're automatically at $23 million. Automatically.
But in many states like New York, where I live, you still have to have trusts and fairly complicated estate planning, even if you're someone like me who's totally and will always be far away from the federal level of exemption.
Yeah.
Still have to have those. And by the way, when you had me down the first time to do your Money Masters show, what year was that? 2016. 16. Was that really? It was only 4 years ago. The guy you had drive me to the airport, your colleague, who was on the show.
Gunderson. Yeah, he's an attorney, right?
Gunderson. One of the things Gunderson said on the way to the airport was, it was $5 million at that point, not 11, I think. Right. But he said, $5 million, give me a few years, and it's easy as can be to make it $50 million.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, well, I'm just saying the thing is, at least for mine, could I still work in the year? The answer is yes. But, and here's my big but. When I was doing this, I had what I call a lot of deal flow. In other words, when it comes to estate planning, I was doing them in Manhattan at the Grand Central Hyatt. We'd put an ad in the New York Times, your magazine. Okay. And by the way, New York Times is expensive back then. Today it's off the charts, but it was $40,000 for like a quarter-page ad back then. But what happens, I would pack the New York, the Garden City Hotel in Garden City, the Westchester Marriott, the Hyatt in Manhattan, and also we did at the Greenwich Hyatt. So we had all these what I call fishing holes we would do a sweep of during that week, and I'd have thousands of people that would literally show up, and we kept raising the bar. Eventually we had for states over 4 million. In other words, we didn't invite anybody unless I had 4 million. I'd still get 300 people that would show up in New York. I was going, there's a lot of money in Manhattan. I mean, it was like, wow. And I was making a lot of money back then. But listen, there was still that bread and butter that was, between 4 million and 10 million. All of a sudden, it just got wiped off the map. You got to imagine that whole group got wiped off, and actually 40 to 20 million got wiped off the map. And so what happened is my cost structure didn't go down putting ads in the New York Times because I'm losing, 50% of my audience. So basically, we just disbanded it. And after looking at it as a business plan, I jumped into pensions because the thought was they're not going to eliminate the federal income tax. So, I've been working pensions ever since.
Nick, there's another aspect to this you might think about how things change under new policies.
Yeah.
So let me start off with an analogy. Right now, if we had real time of day pricing for electricity in New York State, which has more generation power than it uses electricity, would be free in the middle of the night because the big nuclear and coal plants have to get the stuff out of the building. So they would literally charge you nothing in the middle of the night or so close to it doesn't matter. When we are fully into renewables, particularly solar, the cheapest electricity is going to be at 3 p.m. during the sunlight hours.
Right, yeah.
We're going to have technologies that are either actual batteries or pseudo batteries, like pumping water up a hill and sending it back down when there's high demand. Well, what's happened with the higher estate tax is it's totally changed the incentives for giving to lifetime giving, not when you die. So my wife and I had this plan when we died to give most of our money to charity, and instead we're funding it during our lifetime when it's tax deductible. And now under the 2017 tax law, we do it in chunks. We gave away a quarter of our income in 2018. In 2017, I'm sorry, which funded a number of years of giving, 5 years, and pretty soon we'll do it again. So the changes in the estate tax law have had a significant effect on charities, many of which are now having problems under the 2017 law because for many, many people, there's no value in the deduction.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. In other words, it has made charitable planning less desirable, but also it traps a lot of the money in the higher generations waiting to die. In other words, there's
now it's done the reverse though. It's you should be giving it away during your lifetime unless you've got $11 million or if you're a couple $23 million.
Right. Okay. But now it also comes down to this next issue. We have a new administration. The Biden administration. So
they're back.
They're back, right? My question is, maybe I'll hit with Professor Worthington. are we going to see this unified credit? I mean, for me, if it dropped to 600,000, it would open up, back a lot of estate planning. Okay. But at 23 million, it doesn't do much here. Are we going to see a drop in the unified credit equivalent, Dan?
I think so. If they get their way, the discussion has been somewhere around 3, but you never know what's going to happen. I mean, Barack Obama is the one that was responsible for the larger his administration's the one that pushed the larger deduction, basically to take it off the table. I think as a political discussion point. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was excessive. I never thought they would go that far, but they did. And so clearly, it seems to me it's excessive. Won't tell my clients that. There's still plenty of opportunity for planning in that space, particularly as you said. The incentive is now to give it away during life, especially in trusts where you can use it to leverage larger amounts in trust and protect the credit. That's still the incentive until they change the law, and especially for wealthy people that may have businesses to protect and other things, because the incentive not only is to freeze the estate tax exemption, but also to do domestic asset protection trusts to protect themselves from creditors and lawsuits and other things that may come up, even though they may be errant, or they may be in the future. So the estate planning and domestic asset protection area have combined together to create an interesting dynamic now. That was always generally a separate area. Now it's a kind of a unified area because of the necessity, and people who are in that middle wealth range, and under 23 is pretty much middle still. Is the incentive is not only just to do estate planning, but also asset protection. Now, the other dimension of this is the multi-generational dimension. And so you get into a multi-generational dimension, you're talking about the opportunity to do some pretty sophisticated planning that's values-based, that can include a charity, and often does, because of the connection between wealth and responsibility. And a lot of people still feel that need to give back, the need to do good, and to create a connection that provides an educational opportunity and opportunities in the community for the kids to be participative in social good. And so there's still great opportunities, and a lot of that is not only the family motivation, but the motivation of the legal counsel and what they'll tell them, because frankly, that really goes a long way. It's how they're educated. I mean, if they have all the facts, they're going to be philanthropic, because it's the smart thing to do anyway, and it's a smart thing to do educationally for their kids.
Yeah. And Professor Danko, there has been a movement toward impact investing. We had on our prior show Ben Banerjee, who's the head of the Swiss Impact Investing Association, which they're having the head of the European Investment Bank will be on our show this Friday, his show, which is Friday on the IBM TV network. Impact investing, of course, is to invest not just in a company, but a company that's doing social good. So you wrote this nice book, Richer Than a Millionaire. Can you tell us a little bit about that philosophy that you're trying to portray to the American public when it comes to being richer than a millionaire?
Yeah, Dan, of course, touched upon this. I mean, and so did you, about the tax implications. Now, look, you don't want to have an estate tax. You don't want to give it to your kids because, well, Warren Buffett famously said,
You'll die watching that happen.
Give your kids enough money so that they can do anything, but not so much they can do nothing. You don't want to spend it on yourself because, you have this built-in frugality, and how many pairs of shoes do you need? I mean, when we talk about, $23 million in a household as being a threshold, to be in a top 1% of the households in the United States right now, you only need $11 million. That's, the minimum. I mean, certainly it can go, to billions. So clearly the most logical thing to do is to be charitable. You can have the impact, helping others in so many positive ways, and not spoiling your family.
An awful lot of people, though, are not charitable, as shown up at least in the IRS's estate tax statistics. There's an enormous number of people who are not. I agree with you, though, it's smart. And by the way, Warren Buffett's kids are all incredibly wealthy. At least one of them is a billionaire.
Sure.
So I'm not so sure about his limitation. But in fact, I've talked with a number of wealthy people who are concerned that if they leave more than $4 or $5 million to their children, that they will get them in trouble and ruin their lives. And I'm sure all of us have met trust fund kids whose primary occupation in life is wheedling more money out of a trust officer rather than doing something productive in society. One of the things, as we have a new administration, a new majority in Congress, I hope they would take up, I don't expect they will, is we should go to a more elegant system about untaxed wealth at death. We should tax capital gains, not basis. And in my next book, the new tax system, I would allow you to make unlimited gifts from basis, which we now have well identified because of computer technology. Everybody knows their basis and their gain.
Right.
You can give away all the gain you want. Limit the amount you can give out of a gain, however, to 20% of your income. And at death, we just apply the capital gains tax. Or if you're married and have a surviving spouse, at the death of the second spouse. But it's much more elegant to tax capital gains, not basis.
Right. Yeah, because it's the appreciation that takes place.
Capital gain rate is right. I think that's one of the problems is the capital gain rate is expected to go up significantly, which can impact the market significantally. So, I mean, it depends. I mean, and which group of goons you have in charge in Washington, right?
Yeah.
What their philosophy is and how badly they want to hurt the markets and punish capitalism.
Right.
I don't think anybody I've ever talked to in Washington about that wants to hurt the markets or punish people. They all believe in the ancient principle. It is older than the inaccurate notion that God says a marriage should be only a man and a woman, which is less than 2,000 years old. We had levirate marriages at the time of Jesus. What they want is, their view is, this is marginal utility argument. Once you have a lot more money, you only were able to make it because you were in the United States, you were the or other advanced countries. You're the beneficiary of this system, and you should pay a higher amount back. They see that as fairness, that you benefited from this system, and now you should pay back into that system at a higher marginal rate. I've interviewed lots of congressmen. I've never heard anybody say that.
You never. I mean, everybody has to pay capital gains. And so if you have your graduated capital gains, that goes to your argument, right? But it isn't typically graduated.
But most people don't have capital gains. The overwhelming number of people in this country. Their wealth is in a retirement plan, which will be taxed at labor rates.
Right, because they have income in respect of the decedent. But the thing is, David, see, here's something that's really simple. Wealthy people can do to escape taxes altogether. But poor people don't have the opportunity. Poor people I'm talking about is anybody who's working. And I was very fortunate when I started estate planning in 1976 because my grandmother had a large estate. And I looked at it and I told my parents, I said, you can work all your life. Okay, and not, if you plan her estate properly, you will inherit more than you could ever make working. Seriously. And that was that got me involved a little bit into estate planning, not realizing I'd make it a career in Naples, Fort Myers, Palm Beach, but it became very important. But if you think about it, let's imagine you bought a property like we did for $15,000. Then all of a sudden now it's worth $500,000 at death. Then when they die, they pass it to their kids. There's a step up in basis. There is no capital gains tax. There is no estate tax, and they get the $500,000 tax free. Okay, I'm serious. I've been down that pike before personally. So the thing is, and you could do this with a lot of properties. You buy them at these low bases, let them appreciate over time, die, it's inherited, and that it completely escaped taxation in the amount of millions of dollars. Now, everybody on the panel that goes to work, including myself, I go to work for a living too, I get hit with Social Security taxes. I get hit with Medicare taxes. I get hit with state income tax. I get hit with federal income tax working. It's a disincentive for me to work. I would rather do what I just described, invest, accumulate assets on a capital gains basis, which I'm not taxed while it appreciates. I'm just letting you know. All that appreciation in my stock and real estate portfolio is not taxed. Die, let my kids get it, no taxes. What? And then I get this argument, well, the estate tax, they got taxed twice. No. You think in terms of a working person. Think in terms of a non-working person, and they never paid a tax, David, ever.
Right. Well, first of all, the vast majority of wealth at death is untaxed gains. And Bill Gates is the perfect example for this, up to the point that Microsoft started paying a dividend. He had a fortune derived from a tax-free gift from his parents that saved him from being indicted for a crime because he bought something he didn't have the money to pay for it. And
not as Porsche, I hope, but go on.
No, the software, the original software.
From Tim Patterson. Yes, I know.
Yeah, he didn't have the money, but mom and dad had the money, and they gave him this $50,000 gift. So he has zero basis in his stock.
Right.
And except for what he sold, he's never paid any tax on it. And were he to have died in 2010 and there had been no dividends, he wouldn't have paid any. If we eliminate the corporate income tax and replace it with a new set of rules that encourage investment and distribution of profits to either owners or employees, all issue about double taxation of corporate profits goes away. That simplifies the system and avoids a lot of game playing. It also ends this horrible practice where lots of big companies now turn a profit on their taxes through deferral. And we would have a much simpler system where there's a level playing field as to the amount of money you have. And we should have some kind of de minimis exemption for people who do have built up some wealth that's not subject to tax, but 11 million per person just strikes me as really high. Yeah. Back in 2001, I asked the National Federation of Independent Businesses, the NFIB, and the Farm Bureau for the names of people who were informed in their opinion on estate tax issues. And there were a bunch of car dealers and construction company owners and big farmers. And I interviewed them all, and every single one of them was opposed to raising the estate tax exemption above $5 million. They thought that would be atrocious. That was for a couple. They thought that would just be atrocious. That, if I had more than that, I should be taxed on my gains, which was quite a surprise, of course, to the NFIB and the Farm Bureau who directed me to these people.
Right. Yeah, because the thing is, usually you're pretty well off once you have about $10 million in your bank account. It's not that you're suffering from poverty and squalor, but it seems to me there's such a disparity. And our education system, since we're supposed to be talking about higher education issues, has another problem in this whole thing called student debt. And the student debt ratio right now is pretty high. I think it's right now we're sitting at about a 1.3 trillion. In student
1.7. It's 1.7.
It went up since we last
talked. The latest number is 1.7.
1.7 trillion in student debt. Now, Bill, what are we doing to our young people? And it does affect my business to a certain extent, because as I work with doctors and dentists and we try to do business transitions to the next generation, the first thing that comes back is they can't afford to buy my practice. Well, why not? They're saddled with student debt. So what happens is that these people, they come out, they load up with student debt. And I'm not talking about people that have small incomes. These are doctors and dentists that can't buy into a practice because they're loaded with $250,000 to $500,000 in student debt upon graduating from dental school or medical school. How can they ever become the millionaire next door when they start off $500,000 in the hole? Professor Danko.
Yeah, but first of all, did you see on the news today there are students at Columbia University protesting the tuition? I mean, you're probably going to see more of that. Look, I've talked to a number of dentists on how they started their practice, and they were fortunate to have a grandparent who subsidized their venture, and I get it. It is burdensome. It's just it's
well. I mean, the thing is, I was able to go, but I was very fortunate. I went to University of Miami, a private school, University of Denver, got my LLM, got my MBA, came out with no student debt. But I came from a family that I didn't have to borrow any money it was all paid for basically by my upper end units, so my antecedents, as they would say. And then I went to class with students that had a lot more. Like Stuart Miller was my classmate. He's worth $1 billion. His dad founded Leonard Corp. So there's a whole group of us at the University of Miami that student debt was not an issue, and so it never really faced us. And we were in the private schools system. Then I go to the public and the other school systems. I find out, what? You're graduating with this huge amount of student debt. How are you going to ever pay it back? And then even some of the students I was teaching, I said, why are you going to private school? I knew their parents. Why are you going to private school? Frankly, you can't afford it. David, when are we going to go to this? Because I'm sure you have them at Syracuse. That honestly, they don't belong there. They're spending way too much money to go to that law school.
Yes. I mean, I remember in particular one student, an emigre, who has borrowed up to his eyeballs because he thought, well, I'm going to go to accounting school, get my master's CPA, which is the class. He was taking my class from the business school. And then I'll make $1 million a year. When I walked through the pyramid at firms and told him, this is unlikely to happen, not to mention that he was not a very good student, he was just completely crestfallen because he'd been badly advised. I mean, the reason we have this student loan problem is CBS News back in the Vietnam War era went and interviewed a doctor, a handsome guy sitting on the beach. They didn't show his face. They just showed you his, trim, tanned body. He was on the beach in Malibu, and he was boasting about how he had gotten a medical deferment from the war, student loans, there was some flaw in the program back then. He wasn't going to pay them back. And people were enraged about it. And Congress then passed this student loan debt law that says there are only 3 ways to get out of your student debt. You pay it back in full, you die broke, or you persuade them that you're 100% disabled. And I've written about people who are clearly disabled, cannot work, and they have to fight to get their loans relieved. This is a fundamental policy mistake. The policy debate, I believe, should be how many years of education do we need to provide at no marginal cost to the student, that is, taxpayers are going to pay for it, to have a healthy, stable society. And for people with advanced degrees, some of which do not pay big money. If you become a microbiologist,
right,
it's not likely you're going to make a huge fortune. The way to handle that cost, if it's additional education, which provides us with a benefit. Science is responsible for half our economic growth since World War II. The way to provide that is through what the British do, and some of the countries in Europe, since we can't say they're part of Europe anymore under the Brexit.
No, not anymore.
And that is they tax you additionally. There's a surtax based on your income. And you end up paying a share of it back. I think we should view higher education as an investment. It should be accompanied by, you're not performing, we kick you out. Which, when I went to college in the 60s and 70s, I saw a number of students who were not performing. They were kicked out.
Right.
I don't see that anymore. And I may be wrong, Bill. If you're actively teaching, I don't know if you are, Dan, whether we're kicking out students who don't perform, because when they're big tuition providers, we see them differently.
And we also have just joined us the Dean of the Washburn University School of Law, Carla Pratt. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about something near and dear to our heart, which you're probably familiar with because you're the Dean of Washburn University School of Law, is student debt. And the thing is, and I know at Washburn, I think that's where Senator Dole went to school, right?
Yeah.
But since you're the dean, you probably experienced this or probably know more of it firsthand. Bill Danko up there, he was the author of a book called The Millionaire Next Door. Also, his new book is called Richard and Millionaire. I don't know if you've read that. I read it a long time ago. Let's love this book.
The Millionaire Next Door is a great book.
Oh, yeah, he sold only 4 million copies. David K. Johnson, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times best-selling author, who's also part of our panel today, and also is a lecturer at Syracuse Law School. And then we have Dan Worthington, who's the former Associate Dean of the University of South Dakota School of Law. And Carla, you're active as the Dean at Washburn University School of Law. What is the situation of student debt with your students coming out of law school?
Well, I have to say that fortunately we are a public institution, so that helps to have some taxpayer dollar investment, allows us to keep tuition relatively low compared to other law schools and the undergraduate side as well. But the taxpayer investment is not nearly what it used to be. And so our tuition is $23,000 and change. And, I came from another law school that, the tuition is $50,000, and that's a huge price tag. And so I think we see a lot of students who just run away because they say, oh, well, I can't afford that. And I certainly don't want to take out $150,000 or more in loans just to go to law school. So it is very concerning, the cost of education and the diminishing taxpayer investment in higher education. I tell people all the time that I am biased because I am an educator, but my view is that if we invest as taxpayers in our young people's education, they become equipped to have better jobs and they'll pay more in taxes over the lifetime of being a taxpayer. So I think you get a really good return on that investment if you invest in higher education.
Carla, how many students do you have in your law school?
We have a little over 300.
300. Okay, so at $23,000, your annual budget's in the neighborhood of how much? Because I'm going to show you something we could be doing that's relevant to our discussion. What's your annual budget in round numbers?
Yeah, so our overall budget is about $18 million.
$18 million. Okay, so think about this. If somebody made a gift to your school of $360 million, and we've been talking about huge fortunes, multi-billion-dollar fortunes out there, you could become a tuition-free institution, very meritorious in your approach. And if somebody gave you $400 million, you could probably afford in the future to hire better faculty than you're able to hire right now. And
we have the best faculty, David.
What? No, I understand.
They have a great
go forward, raising the level and quality of, and attracting faculty. And my point is that a lot of the money that is being given away at death by those people with a family fortune over 23 million is being frittered away in various ways. Back in 1990, late 94, I wrote a piece in the Chronicle of Philanthropy chastising Bill Gates for buying the Codex Leicester, and saying it was beneath the dignity of his fortune to be frittering his money away like this, and recommending that he fund something worthy of him. And I suggested on the Carnegie model, he start Gates University in Seattle completely free as a public service. He decided to go. Now, I know because he told a colleague of mine at the New York Times that this article had been brought to him and it influenced his thinking about what he would do. But what his choice he made was, of course, was public health. But right. We could substantially reduce the cost of higher education, both in public and private schools, if people made gifts for that general purpose. Part of the problem that the gifts are not helping with that is those endowment monies are not being used as well as they could to lower tuition. Harvard has so much money right now. The last time I looked, it was $40 billion, that they could easily be a tuition-free institution. So I wonder maybe one of the things to do in this country is to promote to very wealthy people, even if you have to get together with some others. Let's find ways to make, through your gift, an enduring impact on society and higher education. And Dan, if you got enough money, you could rename your law school the Worthington School of Law. They'll take a naming gift. I'm sure Carla would go to the legislature and say, please, Bill Danko wants to give us $400 million. We want to call it the Bill Danko College of Law.
I wish I did. That would be great.
Wow.
Me too.
Well, what about that, Carla? Do you see grants like that? Because like I said, the law school I went to, University of Miami, it's always the student had to have a relationship. One of my classmates was Stuart Miller, whose dad founded the Leonard Corporation because his dad was Leonard Miller, which, by the way, is a big home builder, and he's worth over $1 billion. Stuart is. He gifted the University of Miami $100 million. That was the first gift. Then he made another gift of another $100 million or so because they needed more for their endowment. They always have these fundraising programs. And at Campbell, where I've taught, they actually had one person in charge of this advanced giving strategies. Do you have anything like that at Washburn University School of Law, where somebody's involved in those types of giving organizations? In other words, setting up gifts.
We do. So we have a wonderful partnership with the Washburn Foundation. They help us do fundraising and development work. And we have a Whiting Society at Washburn so that people who want to leave a gift at the end of life, so they want to make sure that they have enough resources during life, but they want to leave whatever is left over to their kids and to philanthropy. We work with those folks to help them give a gift at the end of their life in their estate, as well as give during their lifetime. So, we're happy to work with donors in any capacity that works for them. And our number one goal right now, I'm so glad we're talking about this, because our number one goal right now is raising funds for student scholarships. And so I would love to see more investment in students, and students are so grateful. We have some smaller donor funds that, they fund a partial scholarship. They don't nearly produce enough income to fund full tuition for a student, but students are so grateful no matter what the amount of the scholarship is. They are so grateful for all the help. And students ask me, can I write the donor a thank you note? So it really warms my heart to see students' reactions to our donors and our alumni investing in their future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Congress, they passed this opportunity zone, which Blake Christian, one of our CPAs, will be on Tax Time, loves opportunity zones. And frankly, billions of dollars, I think almost 100 billion, have gone into opportunity zones, because what allows somebody to do is to escape that capital gains tax, David, while they're alive on their appreciation. But then in return, they have to actually invest in these areas that are designated as zones that need improvements on. Carla, why don't we have an opportunity zone type of law for higher education? I mean, why are we missing that?
So I think it's because we've shifted as a society in terms of the way we think about higher education. We've started to think about it as a private good rather than a social good. And so we think about it as, you're getting a degree that's going to advance you. And we don't really think about the collective good of society. When someone is educated, they become a better citizen, more informed citizen. They become more equipped to volunteer in their community, sit on nonprofit boards, for example, and give back. And as I said before, they usually earn more money. We know from the research that people with a college degree earn more money over their lifetime. And so they're going to pay more taxes over their lifetime, and so they're going to invest more in our society.
Yeah.
Nick, one of the things that would be very smart for law schools and even undergraduate colleges to do is to recognize that the time to start developing donors isn't when they're alumni. It is the first day they arrive on campus.
Right.
And to begin putting into their heads the idea that other people, through their taxes and their gifts, made this education that you are getting possible, and to continually remind them that if they're successful, we expect, because you have good manners, that you are going to donate back to the school. I spoke yesterday with a friend of mine who is the dean of a law school, thought of as a theory school, but in fact, I know it as a place where there are lots of very skilled litigators and practitioners. And half the lawyers in the metropolitan area that school is in came from that school. It's a very local market. People don't come there nationally. And only a tiny fraction in the teens of graduates of that law school make gifts to the law school.
Really?
And it's like, really? You know, what that tells me is that the prior deans didn't work on developing donors.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of things we could do to generate more money, but we also need to make sure that that money is focused on higher education. And, you know, the best example of what tuition-free education can do is Berea College in Kentucky. It's completely free. It draws on poor students overwhelmingly, I mean, if not entirely, and it produces really good graduates. If you've ever been in a work position or any other area where you have to interact with Berea graduates, they walk away with good critical thinking skills and a rigor to how they approach things.
Yeah, well, also in Georgia, where Bill Danko's partner, because his Tom Stanley, who's since passed away, his children went to school called North Springs High School. He was in the same school my kids were at. Like, no kidding, when I lived in Atlanta. And what happened was in North Springs and in Georgia generally, if you graduate with a 3.0 grade point average, you get to go to any Georgia school tuition free. So my son graduated from North Springs with a 3.0 grade point average. He got to go to Georgia Tech, get his bachelor's degree in engineering, and paid no tuition. Then went on to Duke, got his he was in the PhD program, ended up with a master's degree at Duke. We got full scholarship, no tuition. So he graduated, no student debt. But there's places like that, like Georgia, which you can go to high school at, and if you graduate 3.0 or better, you go to college free of tuition. Now, here's how they did it, though. The lottery payments, the lottery tickets, all the money went to fund a higher education. They did the same thing in Florida, except they changed the law after they started the lottery, and they took all the money in Florida. In other words, it was going to go to higher education, and then all of a sudden they said, forget it, it's ours now. Seriously.
That's what they did in California. California lied.
They lied in Florida. So in Florida, they sold the lottery to the public as it's going to fund higher education, and they stole the money from the kids. Now, my question, now I'm going to go to the great state of Kansas. Was there any talk of a lottery system funding higher education? I'd feel more not as guilty buying a lottery ticket if I'm funding higher education as I would right now when I'm just throwing my money away. Is there any talk about that in Kansas, Carla?
I'm not sure if there's talk about it. I think the primary focus is K through 12. In Kansas, that has been the primary focus for a while because our citizens wanted to make sure K through 12 is adequately funded. And certainly I understand that is, a priority. So, but I think we're having discussions now about how it is important to create avenues for students, especially those who come from backgrounds where their families cannot make a contribution to their education after high school. So I think, like I said, we are fortunate that we do get some funding, and we're very grateful for that. But I would like to see it increase.
Yeah, and then there should be a whole policy discussion on how we can change the culture to fund higher education. Like I said, they were successful in Georgia, and I'm just flabbergasted they were able to actually do that. And people today can move to Georgia. I think you have to be there for at least a year, go to high school, graduate at 3.0, go on to Georgia State. You can go, which is a good school. I think, by the way, a really good school if you ever happen to go down there. Got great law library. It's in Atlanta. You can go to University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia Southern, Georgia Tech, all tuition free, and then go on from there. But it sounds to me like even at 20,000, $23,000 a year, which is an American price. That is a reasonable price for school because a lot of them are $50,000-$60,000 to go to school. But still, it's a struggle. I mean, and at the end of the day, you're going to come out with a huge amount of student debt. Is there any initiative? Because I think what David was saying is right, to go after, there are some people that are wealthy donors that could like I said, fund the whole bloody thing, you know?
Absolutely. We are always looking for friends as well as our alumni to invest in student education. So we are constantly building relationships and letting people know our mission. So Washburn University was founded to educate all people. It was founded after the Civil War to educate all people, including the recently freed slaves, but with a mission of educating people who couldn't afford to pay. And so access and affordability are at the core of who we are. So any donors who want to support that mission, I would welcome a call from.
Right. Yeah. Because other than that, what we're ending up in a society, which we see right now, which bothers the bejeevers out of me, that 40% of the people in the United States in an emergency can't get a hold of $400. And, you know, and if you're in a situation like that, then how are you ever going to go to law school unless you're a Professor Worthington who managed to be able to navigate his way through the system? Professor Worthington, you may want to share your story. I thought it was kind of interesting. You were able to navigate through that whole system to get your JDLM and ED.
Well, my mother was 15 when she had me. My dad was a factory worker. And so I figured out quite early that if I were going to go to college, it would be on merit. And so I tried to do very well in college. I got an appointment with the United States Military Academy at West Point, which is a full ride. But I was offered other options. And so I ended up going there, but then transferring to one of the other schools where I had an option. So I didn't have any student debt for the first few years because I was on full ride scholarship and supplemented with supplemental money, Pell Grant money, whatever, because we didn't have any money. But then when I went to I graduated initially from BYU, and I was on a ROTC scholarship there, so they paid the tuition. I was on a presidential scholarship there because of my grades. And then when I went on for my master's and doctoral programs, I was on scholarships. And so first year in law school, I wasn't, but after that, I was. And so I was very fortunate to be. I did a joint JD EDD program, and the university basically underwrote the rest of my education because I had written that program and implemented it, created a journal, and done a number of other things. And so, I mean, yes, I was, God blessed me. But I mean, we're fortunate because we're creative, and I think there's still opportunities for that, for kids to be creative about creating their own educational path and creating those opportunities. But again, I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah, and Professor Dean Pratt, how were you able to afford going to law school? I mean, if you're paying $50,000 a year in tuition, how are you able to manage that?
Well, personally, I grew up on a farm and we were poor, and I didn't know how I was going to afford law school. And I went to law school back when it was unusual for a law school to offer a full tuition scholarship, but I was fortunate enough to get that at Howard University School of Law, and I'm eternally grateful to them and feel like I'm indebted to them until, for the rest of my career. So I make sure that I give back to support them in supporting students going forward who don't have the resources and wouldn't be able to afford a legal education without that support. For us, we definitely look at need. Student need is part of our calculus, but as I think your other panelists have pointed out, in law school, the bulk of the money goes to students for merit scholarships. That is, students with strong academic credentials. And so I would love to have a larger pool of money for need-based scholarships as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Professor Danko, how did you manage to get through the education system?
Yeah, everybody grew up poor, didn't they? Yeah, my dad died when I was 5, but he had a disability from World War II, and I was able to get some military scholarship help, and I won a Regents scholarship in New York State. So basically, I went free to a state university. But then when it came to graduate school, my PhD program, I took out a student loan. I toughed it out. I did it. But, also, David, now you referred to Maria. You meant Ave Maria College, right?
No, I didn't. I mean, I very carefully didn't say where the school is.
Oh, but Ave Maria, Tom Monahan, the billionaire from Domino's Pizza, created that university, mostly in Florida. But isn't the law school in Michigan someplace? Ave Maria?
I don't know. This is a school where the dean is a personal friend, and we were discussing an article I'm working on for DC Report, and I wanted to make sure the dean used to teach professional responsibility. Lawyers used to have ethics; now they have professional responsibility. But it was something I knew about the school from another professor there, and had talked about the past, and it just always struck me how you're the law school serving this metropolitan area of a couple million people, the by far the biggest one. The political structure, the social structure is totally dominated on the lawyer side by this school. It's not a place that has a lot of Harvard or Yale or Columbia or Stanford grads, and almost none of them give. It's also indicative of why that particular community hasn't done so well, because it doesn't have a strong philanthropic core among its community leadership, unlike where I live in Rochester, New York, where we have a tremendously philanthropic core of the burger class with an H.
We talk about trying to, create this philanthropic mentality. 20 years ago at my university, the State University of New York at Albany, I created a scholarship. We have two others at another school as well, but named after my parents. And it's not based on academics. It's based on how much of a giver you are of your time to others. So it's based on volunteerism, very much, the theme of richer than a millionaire. Now, it's only $2,000 a year for a student, but a number of students have since taken that model on and become the same kind of philanthropic entity within the school, saying, I want to create one named after my parents. And it's good. And in fact, one of my favorite students, he went to law school and he created one at the State University of New York at Albany on behalf of his parents. So, and the model is the student gets $1,000. Okay, well, that's not a lot, but it goes towards their tuition. But they also get $1,000 that they can use in their own name, but it has to be a 501(c)(3) organization that gets the money, where they can personally choose an organization to get that matching amount. So it really, and it's been going on for 21 years now. And there's no end in sight. My point is, it inspires other students. I think it's the right thing to do, and you got to start that mentality when they're still a student, and showing them that it can be done.
Right.
You don't have to be a Tom Monahan with $1 billion to create a university. We can get our thousands of students to each contribute, and I think we'll be so much better off.
Right. Yeah, you just burst my. Professor Kimberly has just joined us. She's a founder of the IBM TV network, and she also sits as on the advisory council of North Carolina State University Computer Science Department. And Kimberly, we're discussing the. Just introduce. We have Professor Dan Worthington, former dean of South Dakota University School of Law, Carla Pratt, the acting current dean of the Washburn University School of Law. Everybody knows David K. Johnson, Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times bestseller, and has been with us for quite some time on the IBM TV network. And of course, Bill Danko, co-author of A Millionaire Next Door, and his latest book, I have it right here, Richer Than a Millionaire.
Thank you.
That. Can't beat that. Got to give a plug to his latest book, and I have it right here.
That's right.
Okay. So Kimberly, we're talking about we're talking about student loans and student debt. What are your thoughts on what are they doing in North Carolina State?
Well, so North Carolina State, it's a pretty good school, and I guess they don't have any issues with money or funding. They always seem to be able to get what they need. There's just not, to me, enough scholarship funds to go around to the students, and so many students are graduating with a debt that's higher than a mortgage. And to me, that's done nothing but create indentured slavery in our country. It's not what higher education should be about. You should be more concerned about educating yourself and able to get back into and give back to the economy with your education. But instead, these students are graduating with so much debt that it's just too big of a struggle. And some in today's time have struggled even getting jobs after their education. A lot of our workforce has been outsourced to other countries. So we've invested in a lot of higher education, but our jobs are in other countries. So one of the things that I wanted to do by sitting on some of the boards of the universities where I work is to help teach the students how to become more what would you I'm teaching them this, but become entrepreneurs, right? To utilize their intellectual property that they have and to rely on themselves more than they're relying on the system to give them a job. And I think that this is something that's missing in some of the elements missing in our education. And they just need this. And I've had a lot of fun working with some of the students, talking to them about how to become more of their own entrepreneur. And just because you're an entrepreneur doesn't mean you can't go work for big corporations, right? What I'm trying to teach them is more about use this and this and rely on yourself as opposed to the system. But my thoughts is we need to get a handle on the cost of education, and our students and children do not need to be graduating with a debt higher than a mortgage. But that's
Well, when they do that, they defer marriage, they defer buying homes, they defer having children, none of which are good for social stability and for the long run future. So I think your point is very well taken, Kimberly.
But I don't know how to approach this because I know that the professors deserve the high pay scales that they get. I know the schools need the money, but there's got to be a better system because you guys, well, I'm in the older crowd, but when I graduated, I paid off my school debt as I went to school. I was able to work a job and pay it off. But the way the system is today, there's no way. I mean, some of the children are graduating with $250,000 debt. And, I'm sorry, but the books aren't worth it. They're just not. I would rather buy a lot of books, Bill Danko's book and David K. Johnson's books, and read those and learn from the experience of others right now than to spend $250,000 for a piece of paper. And that we've got to reel this in because it's not going to build a society where we're going to stimulate the economy because they're too busy paying off debt.
Well, Kimberly, I would argue part of the problem here, though, is that we have created a society where it's okay to be dumb. There's a new word out there you may have seen a lot on the internet in the last few months, free dumb, D-U-M-B, referring to people who won't wear masks. But we've always had the joke, those who can't teach. But we really need to develop a society where being educated and being informed is more honored than it is, without looking down our noses at those people who were not born with substantial intellectual resources. And this is fundamental to the culture that you look at school districts that don't perform. I live 5 blocks from what may well be the worst school district in America. A 9% graduation rate for black males for years. University of Rochester took over one of the high schools. It's been 5 years, and an education theorist running it, they've raised the graduation rate for black males to 70% from 9. And these are people, and this is to do this, you have to pass the state regents exam, which I think is a terrible exam, but nonetheless, it's a daunting threshold. We can change these things, but we're paralyzed about a lot of things. Well, we can't do anything about that. And our priorities have become entirely skewed. I mean, so long as we allow in 20 states, big companies like Caterpillar, Google, Ford, Nissan, Continental Tire, which is German, to keep the state income taxes withheld from their workers' paychecks and use it as capital instead of investors providing capital. So long as we we have a system that is so complicated, we end up in Oregon with thousands of corporations, mom and pop businesses paying a substantial corporate income tax, but Nike pays $10 a year, $800 a year. I think they raised it to from $10 to $800. This is just nuts. And that requires more engagement by more citizens in how do we get good policy, particularly in the area of education.
And I think that that's so important now. And, you know, maybe this is something that we could write down some steps and actually execute them, actually take them somewhere and say, you know, based on some things that we are looking at, because we're all very highly educated, knowledgeable people who know that the system can be improved and be made more affordable for the students. I think sometimes it's intended to do one of two things. It's intended to make indentured slaves out of the students and as they graduate, but also to deprive some people from getting a good education. And there's some great grants out there, but I don't think all the students are aware of the grants. You know, they might be told about them, but I don't think anyone actually sits down with them and says, this is how you can apply for this grant. But unfortunately, we're at the top of the hour. One of the conversations I remember from one of our previous shows is talking about maybe we should write a book about what we want our children to learn. As opposed to what they're being to teach, you know, come up with some ideas. But maybe we can get a student or two on and talk to them and hear from them what they think we need to be doing. And I want to thank all of you.
In the past on economics, and it would be good to get some students on and talk to them about the realities of it, but students from different sorts of backgrounds in different parts of the country and the obstacles. That'd be a terrific idea.
Let's see what we can do. I'll work on it. Maybe some of you who have access to students can encourage one or two to come on and share their stories, share their visions, because it's their visions we need to be working on, right? It's their future that we need to be aiming for and building for them. So thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you next week. Anyone have any last words they'd like to say?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've always kind of left to find the outro, but have a great day, guys.